Well, I think it's not going to be about institutions, but it would be about people, because in modern day we have instant information exchange capacities, and we have a very flexible system that is capable of adjusting to a highly unstable environment. So institutions are failing, and institutions will always be much slower than communities. Institutions imply quite a lot of bureaucracy, and for a global institution to more or less establish itself, it takes a decade, even now, because institutions function in the very same way they used to be. We see now the tremendous impact of social networks on the minds of the people, on political processes, on social processes. We see tremendous changes in mentality that do take place over a year or two, if you follow the dynamics of those changes. So I think it's going to be about people. And another factor that, in my opinion, contributes to that is that if several decades ago, if you look at a typical career of a person, mostly it was developing within the framework of maybe even one organization per life, or maybe just a few organizations per life. Now you have a lot more people that are independent, cooperating with different structures, changing their career paths at different points in time. And let's say the way the professional market is structured right now is very different. You will not see too many examples of people being committed to the same organization for 10, 20, 30 years as it used to be back in the day. So I think it's going to be more about new principles, more about communities, self-organizing communities, and other flexible structures that are using a lot of digital tools that would be much more functional. And I suppose that one of the reasons why the UN is not the one resolving many of the conflicts is to have very sophisticated, complicated procedures. And if on the one hand, we can look at it as a result of, a long-term evolution and whatsoever else, on the other hand, people working in the UN are limited to quite a small group of those who are capable of integrating into a system full of, such detailed procedure rules and whatsoever else. I mean, anyone who has ever seen the procedures of UN hearings and the rules to them, it's like, a document that is over 100 pages. And in order to say a word, you need to follow a procedure that is very complicated and sophisticated. Of course, it does not allow for quick decision making. It does not allow for, fast-tracked processing of information. And while you're preparing for something, Trump has already tweeted 10 tweets, and the stock markets have gone crazy. And, people are preparing for self-defense in case of nuclear war. I mean, it's the processes are just different. And the future is, is up to the leaders, up to communities, and the growing average consciousness of people due to the access to information, education, and creation of content is definitely playing its important role. Well, there was a recent public statement by Vance, and it was quite funny because he said that Ukraine and Russia should trade and cooperate and develop their humanitarian ties and whatsoever else. Mm-hmm. And this was quite hilarious given the context and given the rhetorics that everyone was quite used to. But definitely that's the way forward, because when you have economic ties, when you have trade, when you have humanitarian ties that Russia and Ukraine had to a great extent, and I mean, we have family ties that are so intersected that sometimes it's really hard to say who is Ukrainian and who's Russian. It's pretty much the same shades of the very same thing. So this, I believe, is the only way forward anyway. And even though the statement thrown into the public space by Vance to many sounded ridiculous or not realistic, that's what it was, and that's what it's going to be anyway. And that's the only way to avoid confrontations and conflicts when you have bigger issues that are more important, and you don't want to get into a conflict because you don't want to lose benefits, because you have the ties, because you have the understanding, and you have shared strategic goals. I mean, Russia and China could have been in conflict as well, because Russia has what China needs to a great extent, right? Resources and territory, and there were historical conflicts. But still, there is a mutually beneficial economic way forward that is found when China benefits from cheap resources and Russia benefits from goods and parallel imports and many other things that China has been providing, especially since the beginning of this special military operation. So even though, you know, conflicts could be possible between almost any country, I mean, the way that the nation states are designed and the borderlines do already contain a lot of potential conflict and potential escalation points, because it can never be fixed once and forever. And if 100 years ago we had how many? Less than 100 states on planet Earth, on the political map of our planet. Now we have almost 200 of them, and there is a tendency for creation of smaller and smaller and smaller states, right?
Sure.
And things like nation identity are being built to those, and more of, you know, separation and division is happening in order to create new entities and call them states later on. So the current trend is not for unification, even though we do have regional alliances of different shape. But the current trend is for creation of more and more little states. And this is doomed for conflict because little states cannot survive on their own. They cannot be completely autonomous, and there will always be some kind of a struggle for resources unless there are clear rules of the game for trade and development of overall strategic goals and following those.